A long-planned car accident made me go back to the time before the national college entrance examination. My top priority is to rewrite the miserable plot line. I will work hard and regain the glory of being admitted to Peking University that belongs to me. And kick away the scumbag and hold on tight to the dream guy. Frank. In this life, I won't allow any more missed opportunities. It seems that I'm dead. A car rushed straight towards me. There was a bang, followed by the ear-piercing sound of brakes. For the first time, I realized that I could fly so high. The crisp sound of bones breaking. The dull sound of my whole body hitting the ground. The warm liquid gurgling out from all parts of my body. I can hardly feel the existence of my body anymore. What bad luck. Today was supposed to be the day when I was reborn. But now, my eyelids were getting heavier and heavier. Before they closed completely, I saw the driver who was pulled out of the driver's seat. That familiar face. I instantly understood everything. Darkness completely enveloped me. I could still hear the commotion around me. It seemed that dozens of people were talking non-stop. They screamed, lamented, and expressed their regret. I should be completely dead. Let's take a look at this question. It's a very typical type of question in solid geometry. One auxiliary line can solve the problem easily. Where should this auxiliary line be drawn? Let's call on a classmate. What are you doing in a daze at this time? Mina. Come to the front of the blackboard. Draw the auxiliary line. The voice was still like a machine gun constantly firing, leaving nothing but desolation wherever it hit. I sat at the desk and my whole body shuddered violently. What made me tremble was not the fear of being called on at this moment, but, why am I in the classroom? I hung my head, looked at my hands, and confirmed my current state again. In my left hand, I held a small manual of mathematical formulas. In my right hand, I held a red gel pen. Under my two arms, there was a math test paper with half of the problem-solving steps written on it. On my right side sat Crystal, my best friend in high school. At this moment, she was trying hard to open her eyelids that were already half closed. Is this a dream? But why do I feel so real? I really have the urge to cry. I didn't dare to move, for fear of disturbing this hard-won mirage. Little did I know that in the eyes of the head teacher, after he assigned a classroom exercise, his student, me, didn't show any signs of active thinking. Instead, I started to be in a daze for a long time. Mina. Come to the front of the blackboard. My desk mate Crystal was no longer sleepy at this moment. She reached out and pinched me on my side waist. What are you standing there for? Mina. Hurry up. I walked stiffly to the front of the blackboard, took the chalk that was handed to me, and stood in front of that solid geometry problem. In my field of vision, the regular shape of the solid geometry suddenly collapsed slowly. A line extended from a certain corner, and it broke down the whole figure like unraveling a cocoon. That line seemed to come out from the blackboard, winding around my body, circle by circle, getting tighter and tighter. The next second, amidst the exclamations of the head teacher and the students in the front row, I fainted. It should be due to relatively high psychological pressure recently, causing mental tension. There's nothing serious. I vaguely heard a gentle female voice outside the curtain. Although this is a crucial moment now, you still need to pay attention to the balance between work and rest. If it goes on like this for a long time, you may not be able to perform at your best in the exam room. Then came the voice of the head teacher. You're right. Okay. Then let her rest here for a while. I'll go back to the class first. The curtain was lifted. A middle-aged woman in a white coat smiled at me faintly. Mina. You're awake. Jane, let out a lull sigh. Jane. It's Teacher Jane from the school infirmary. The moment I saw her, another person suddenly came to my mind. Frank. Teacher Jane knows me because of Frank. In the first year of senior high school, I did a brave act, relying on the cardiopulmonary resuscitation math and I learned during the safety education and the summer vacation. When a classmate fainted, I carried out first aid in time and successfully bought time for his subsequent treatment. That classmate was Frank. As Frank Sant. That is. Teacher Jane. She has had a deep impression of me since then. Just as I was thinking about it, the person himself appeared at the door of the infirmary. Frank still looked the same as in my memory. With a slender and thin figure and a clean and cold face. He even looked better in the school uniform than others. Frank. Why are you here? Jane looked at him with some confusion. Are you not feeling well? I stared at him blankly. And some words I had heard about him from others over the years flashed through my mind. Frank graduated from Peking University. Went to a top foreign university for further study. Handled several famous cases. And became a partner of XX law firm at a young age. Frank's gaze stayed on my face for a few seconds, and then turned to Jane. I have a bit of a cold. The temperature has been fluctuating recently. You all need to pay attention. A national college entrance examination is only a few months away. Jane said as she walked towards the door. I'll get you some medicine. Take some precautions. The exam is only a few months away? I was taken aback. I looked at Frank, who walked to my bedside, and said carefully. Frank. What time is it now? Frank lowered his eyes. Looked at the watch on his left wrist. It's 10:32. That's not what I'm asking. I reached out eagerly and grabbed the corner of his clothes. What year and month is it now? Frank frowned. And there was a trace of confusion in his gaze as he looked at me. He still politely answered my question. It's March 2014. 10 years ago? How is that possible? At this moment, I deeply felt the panic of losing control of everything. What did you say? Frank didn't hear clearly what I was mumbling. He bent down slightly. And the back of his hand with a trace of warmth gently touched my forehead. It doesn't seem like you have a fever. Why did you suddenly faint? The concern in his eyes was very straightforward. After that incident in the first year of senior high school, for a while, I jokingly called myself his savior. Once, I accidentally saw that the note for me in his phone had been changed to Savior. This happened to Frank, who was always cold in dealing with people. And it had a very strange cute feeling. It also made me feel a sense of inexplicable accomplishment. Since it's March 2014 now. Then I suddenly remembered that before losing consciousness, the last thought in my mind was if everything could be done all over again. Am I reborn? Accepting the fact that I was reborn wasn't difficult for me. After all, I didn't read so many novels for nothing over the years. Accepting the fact that I was reborn with less than 3 months to go before the national college entrance examination was more difficult. Couldn't the time note of my rebirth be changed to after the national college entrance examination? I'm a useless person with an empty head now. It was already late at night outside. I sat at the desk, looking at the exercises on the page that I should be able to handle easily, feeling extremely miserable inside. The phone in my school bag showed that it was out of power and had automatically shut down. I took a data cable from the drawer, plugged it in, and turned it on. Many messages came in instantly. Most of them were from the same person. Leo. My hand trembled. And the phone fell onto the table in front of me with a dull thud. I muttered to myself, it's 10 years ago now. It's 10 years ago now. I picked up the phone and opened the messages. Nina. I'll be back from the art exam tomorrow. You haven't sent me a message all day today. What's wrong? Nina. I heard that you fainted. What happened? I'm very worried about you. Please call me back as soon as you see this. Nina. There were also 2 messages from Frank. I'll bring you the XX exercises. I'll wait for you at the door of your classroom during the break after the math class. Where are you? There was a considerable time interval between the 2 text messages. Presumably, Frank had already heard about the incident of me suddenly fainting in the math class. That night, I had a nightmare. Perhaps this can't be called a dream. After all, in my memory, this really happened 10 years later. A car accident. That bright black car rushed towards me at full speed, and I had nowhere to escape. The moment I fell to the ground, I could even clearly feel the breaking of my bones and the splashing of my blood. In the dream, the crowd surrounded the car, pulled the person responsible for the accident out of the car, called 120 and 110, and reported my situation. The passers-by loudly emphasized the strong smell of alcohol on the driver. The driver's familiar face was Brother Dong, the confidant of my husband, Leo. Brother Dong stood there with a somewhat numb expression. The moment his gaze fell on me, I seemed to see a trace of helplessness with an apology. "Is alcohol," was what Leo asked him to drink. Leo wanted to kill me. 10 years ago. I would never have thought that I would end up like this with Leo. At first, I got to know Leo through Frank. Compared with Frank, who had a somewhat cold temperament, Leo was like a little sun full of infinite energy. Leo was warm, cheerful, having fulfilled my insertion, funny, and humorous. At that time, I happened to be in the situation where my parents got divorced. After years of confrontation, they finally exhausted their last bit of concern for the family, and they separated and went their own ways. I started living with the elderly in my family. In the dull and busy high school life. In my perhaps somewhat love-lacking and thin youth. Leo was like a bright color with a burning temperature. We agreed to apply to the same university. When our wish came true, we got together. Later, we graduated from university, got jobs, got married, and started our own business. After that, I willingly gave up my career and became a housewife. I thought I could take better care of our life and achieve the harmonious combination of the man working outside and the woman taking care of the home. What awaited me, however, was Leo coming home later and later. And the smell of a mixture of alcohol and perfume on his clothes became stronger and stronger. Our life seemed bright and prosperous on the surface. But I didn't know when. The inside had already decayed completely. On the day I found out that Leo had cheated, I filed for divorce. Leo's eyes instantly turned red. With a thud, he knelt down in front of me and begged me to forgive his momentary folly. "Nina. Please. Please forgive me this time." His voice was trembling. I hardly ever saw him cry. And at this moment, tears were almost welling up in his eyes. "For the sake of all these years we've been together, give me another chance. I really was just muddle-headed for a moment. All these years. I admit that I was indeed swayed. The price of my being swayed was that while he hypocritically begged for my forgiveness, he secretly transferred the assets. He stripped me of all my rights in the company, continued his relationship with the mistress, and they even had a child. The mistress bypassed me and pressured my parents, swaggeringly showing off all the care Leo gave her. She even spoke rudely and insulted my family. She thought that if I were sensible, I should let go and divorce Leo as soon as possible. In her opinion, I didn't even deserve to ask for a share of the company in Leo's hands. That company was Leo's hard work, and I was just a housewife who stayed at home waiting to take care of my husband and children. However, the company was a joint business of Leo and me. We went through difficulties together and started the business. Until today, although I had gradually stepped back, I couldn't change the fact that we were already tightly bound together. Although I didn't ask much about the company's affairs, it didn't mean that I knew nothing. Certain underhanded methods and unseemly operations, once done, would surely leave traces. I thought I was helping Leo deal with the aftermath, but little did I know that in the end, this would become my way out. My request was simple, a divorce. However, Leo refused very firmly. It wasn't until I showed him these pieces of evidence that his face changed drastically. And he finally relented and agreed to talk about it. What I didn't expect was that he would be so crazy. I spent a drowsy night. And everything that had happened in the past 10 years played out in my mind like a movie. When I got up the next day, I had a feeling of sudden enlightenment. Perhaps I really died under the wheels 10 years later. And now, going back 10 years, especially to the time before the college entrance examination, it was another chance given to me by heaven. A chance that everything could still be turned around. I quickly formulated two main directions for my subsequent actions. First, stay away from Leo as far as possible. Second, study hard and get into Peking University. The second point was extremely important at this moment. With less than 3 months left before the college entrance examination. Back then, one if fulfilled website. Although I wasn't a top student, I could still rank among the top 20 in my grade, according to the situation in our school. With my conditions, if I worked hard, I could even strive for Tingshui University or Peking University. But now, my knowledge was already 10 years behind, and it was uncertain whether I could even get into a university. This wouldn't do. At this moment, I thought of Frank again. Frank, who had excellent grades and had already been recommended for admission to university, didn't have to suffer the hardship of the college entrance examination. I decided to act immediately. During the long break after the morning reading, I rushed to Frank's classroom. Frank was sitting at the seat by the window in the last row, reading a book. Between his right index finger and middle finger, he held a black gel pen and unconsciously twirled it. Next to him stood a tall and thin boy, with his back to me, who seemed to be talking to him about something. Frank. I called his name. Upon hearing my voice. Besides Frank, the boy who was talking to him also looked over. The moment I saw the boy's face, I silently cursed, "Damn it," in my heart. When Frank saw it was me, he seemed to have a motion of wanting to stand up. But Leo was much quicker. Frank tilted his head to look at Leo, who was already standing in front of me, and turned his head back and his gaze fell back on the book in front of him. "Nina." Leo looked at me with a face full of surprise. "Are you okay? I heard you fainted yesterday. What happened? Did you catch a cold?" As Leo spoke, he tried to reach out and touch my forehead. I quickly took 2 steps back, and Leo's outstretched hand froze in my draw. "Nina." I surely didn't expect that one day I would feel so disgusted by this affectionate name, Nina. "Sorry. I'm looking for Frank." I bypassed him and waved at Frank, who looked over again. "Frank. As the saying goes, you don't hit someone who's smiling at you." Since I was asking for his help, I smiled even more brightly. I felt that my exposed teeth were almost getting cold. Frank stared at me for a few seconds, and the emotions in his eyes seemed a bit complicated. I didn't have time to explore them. Seeing that Frank still didn't move, I simply walked into his class, grabbed his forearm, and dragged him out. Leo looked a bit unhappy. His eyebrows knitted into a Sichuan character, and he stood at the door blocking my way, as if waiting for an explanation. I could only say that if he was unhappy, then I was happy. I directly pushed him with my other free hand and walked away without looking back. "So, you want me to tutor you?" After dragging Frank out and rambling on for a while, he accurately grasped the main idea of what I wanted. "Yes, and then fulfilled my incest." Yes. Yes. I continued to smile at him. "I heard that you've already been recommended to Peking University, so I dared to trouble you." Frank lowered his eyes, and I didn't know what he was thinking. The few seconds of silence in the air made me feel extremely anxious. At this moment, every second of silence meant a deduction of 10 points from my college entrance examination score. "Please, Frank," I said with a pitiful face. "I also want to go to Peking University. Please help me." Actually, in the previous life, my original aspiration was indeed to go to Peking University. When I was a child, I yearned for the capital city and kept begging my parents to take me on a trip there. My parents promised me again and again, but they always broke their promises for various reasons. Until the family fell apart, I still hadn't been able to make the trip. But in the end, due to various reasons, I wasted nearly 50 points and went to University R with Leo. Now, when I think back on that self-moving behavior, the word stupid is on the tip of my tongue. "You." After a moment, Frank finally responded to me. "You want to go to Peking University? Before, you said you wanted to go to University R and be with." He paused. "Why have you changed your mind now?" Indeed, in the previous life, because of Leo, going to the same university as Leo was my top priority. When I got my scores and started filling out the college application forms, I hesitated for a moment. A better choice? Or a willing compromise? Under Leo's plea of, "I just want to see you every day," the balance in my heart had already tilted. Because now, I know what's truly important. I looked at him. This is my dream. I must hold my destiny in my own hands. I must not change it easily because of others. And I must not become someone else's accessory or possession. Frank looked at me. I knew he couldn't understand what this sentence of mine really meant. If he asked further, I didn't even know how to explain it. Fortunately, having fulfilled Lee, he just looked at me quietly for a few seconds, and the corners of his mouth curved into a very faint arc. "Then work hard," he said. Leo already had the admission notice for the art examination at University R in his hand. At present, he only needed to ensure a qualified score in the cultural courses. He was very confused about my 180-degree change in attitude towards him. Several times, he wanted to have a good talk with me, but I managed to escape quickly. Until that Sunday when I was immersed in doing practice questions in the library. When I came to my senses, there was a strong wind outside, and the sky was as dark as the bottom of a pot. I quickly packed my things. Just as I reached the hall, there was a loud thunderclap, and it began to pour down. I didn't know where Leo had learned that I was in the library. When I saw him, he was holding an umbrella and stood up from a booth not far away and walked towards me. "Mina, and then, I'll take you home." I took a deep breath. "No. Thank you. I'll wait until the rain stops. Also, please call me by my name. Mina." "Mina, what's wrong with you recently?" Leo looked very distressed. "Did I do something wrong? Why is your attitude towards me like this now? This is completely unlike you. Didn't you like me a lot? We even made an agreement to go to University R together. Can I go back on my word now?" I was really too lazy to listen to his nagging here. I took off my coat, put it on my head, and rushed outside. To prevent Leo from following me, I walked really fast. When I was crossing the road, a black car sped past in front of me, and the splashing water instantly wet my clothes. I suddenly couldn't help shaking. The black car, the rainy night, the dull sound of bones breaking, the warm blood. "Mina." My forearm was grabbed by a warm palm, and the heavy rain above my head stopped at this moment. The large black umbrella blocked all the cold. "Be careful. It's a red light now. Didn't you see it?" The boy's usually cold voice was tinged with a trace of anxiety, and even anger at this moment. I looked at him, not knowing that in his eyes, my face was already covered with tears. Frank was stunned for a moment, and then his warm palm gently stroked my back. "It's okay. It's okay. Mina. At present, preparing for the National College entrance examination for me is equivalent to 4 words. Survive in a desperate situation." The sentence from the head teacher that I once scoffed at, "As long as you don't study to death, study as hard as you can," has become my motto at this stage. Leo would wander in front of me from time to time and earnestly tell me that in the city where a university is located, there is an XXXXX technical college. According to my current mock exam results, I can still get into that school. And we can still study in the same place. I really don't need to push myself like this. Well, forget him. Later, he started going in and out with the class beauty from the next class, and they would show up in front of me. I was still as calm as an old monk in meditation, ignoring everything outside and just focusing on attending classes and reviewing diligently every day, and then completing all kinds of exercises assigned to me by Frank. Once, I met the class beauty in the toilet. She was carefully touching up her makeup in front of the mirror at the sink. She glanced at the word book that I carried with me even when I went to the toilet and let out a cold snort from her nose. "Pretending," she sneered. "I heard you want to apply to Peking University. You really don't know your place." Looking at her leaving back, I really wanted to say that the hostility towards me because of someone like Leo is really unnecessary. Occasionally, my grandmother would get up early and pass by the door of my room. She pushed the door open and was surprised to see me writing vigorously at the desk. "Mina, you're up so early. It's not even dawn yet." "Grandma, I didn't get up early. I haven't slept yet. Hard work pays off." With my intense study like being full of energy, a knowledge that was once engraved in my mind really started to recover little by little. My grades were like riding a roller coaster. Frank's expression gradually brightened, and the head teacher silently deleted the other volunteer options he had provided for me before. Finally, heading to Feldleibsei, the decisive moment came. I thought I would be very nervous. But surprisingly, when I was sitting in the National College entrance examination room, my heart was calmer than ever before. Maybe I was even a little excited. I mean, Mina, who can have a second chance like this? Back then, although I had the joy of achieving my wish, I was often wrapped in regret. When the results came out, I thought that if I had a tail, It would definitely be raised proudly at this moment. When I was sitting in the examination room and all kinds of knowledge gushed out in my mind. When I could answer the questions effortlessly. I expected that I should have done well in the exam. But I didn't expect that I would do so well. I had only seen on TV before the scene where the admissions offices of Peking University, Tsinghua University and a group of key universities would come to the candidates' homes to compete for students. I never thought this would happen to me in my life. I have to say, it's so cool. Creating a miracle in 3 months. Crystal gave me a thumbs up. You're amazing. Nina. With a good foundation. There's no need to be afraid of not winning. I quickly sent my results to Frank to tell him the good news. It's not an exaggeration to say that he deserves a large part of this credit. This is also the beginning of my new life. Nina. When I went to school to confirm the final volunteer that day, I also saw Leo and the class beauty. They were standing in a daze in front of the honor roll with my photo on it. I waved at Leo with a big smile. He was stunned for a moment and immediately left the class beauty beside him and trotted up to me. Nina. Leo. I leaned close to his ear. I won't go to the XXXXX vocational college. I wish you a long and happy life together. The XXXXXX vocational college that I didn't get into. The class beauty went there instead of me. Nina. It's not like me and her. It's none of my business. Back then, after I entered our university with Leo, we got together as a matter of course. However, this relationship was carried out in a clandestine way. Leo said at that time that he didn't want to be the object of everyone's discussion and gossip. I actually believed it. It wasn't until later when I caught him cheating and decided to get a divorce that during the process of collecting evidence, I found that all of this had already shown signs as early as our university days. Even on the night when I accepted Leo's proposal. On the other end of the phone, Leo, who accompanied me the whole night. There was another girl lying beside him. And I, relying on the beautiful past we had, believed him again and again. I even gave up my own thoughts. Was willingly PUAED by Leo. And became a person who lost myself and was finally abandoned and harshly. This time, I will never let history repeat itself. I finally got into Peking University as I wished and became an alumnus of Frank. Occasionally, when I think back to the things about running the company with Leo in my previous life, I deeply feel the lack of my legal knowledge. Which is why I was deceived and coaxed in many cases. So, in addition to the literature that I'm interested in, I actively selected many courses in law. So I almost meet Frank, who majors in law, every day. Over time, whenever the classmates of Frank in the law school see me, they will wink and say, Frank, hadn't fulfilled why, your Nina is here again. Frank's temperament is almost the same as that in high school. Most of the time, he looks like someone who doesn't want strangers to approach. And even acquaintances are better off staying away. In my previous life, we didn't communicate much. And in the following years, we completely lost contact. It's just that Frank was so famous at school back then that I could occasionally hear some words about him from the people around me. A person like him will be excellent wherever he is. In this life, even though our relationship has become closer, when I hear his classmates undisguised teasing like this, I'm still a bit worried that he will mind. However, Frank just nodded at me across the crowd and casually took away the backpack on the seat next to him. Nina. Over here. Coming. The afternoon classes ended quickly. And the classmates winked and called each other to go for dinner. Naturally, they didn't invite Frank and me. When one of Frank's roommates passed by me, he even said, "A beautiful Friday goes better with a candlelight dinner." Frank gave him a cold look. Well, your roommate likes joking a lot. Doesn't he? Looking at Frank's profile as he expressionlessly organized his school bag. I thought about it and still said it. Don't take it to heart. Frank stood up. And I was still dawdling. Putting away my pen. He looked down at me. Do you mind? Me? I waved my hand. I don't mind this at all. Then. He paused. Do you want to have a candlelight dinner? I was so shocked that I forgot to put the cap on my pen. Frank didn't rush to urge me either. We just maintained the posture of one standing and one sitting, looking at each other in silence. Until Anina broke the slightly ambiguous silence in the air. I turned my gaze to the door of the lecture theater. If Leo had some sense, he should be able to see something called murderous intent in my eyes. Obviously, he didn't. Frank, I won't have dinner with you tonight. I quickly stuffed all the things on the desk into my backpack and rushed towards Leo at the speed of a 50-meter dash. I grabbed his coat and dragged him out. Before leaving, I briefly looked back. Frank was still standing there, not moving. But I suddenly felt that there seemed to be a low pressure surrounding him. But I have to deal with more important things first. I think I've made it clear enough to Leo. And I've been avoiding him thoroughly. Unexpectedly, after entering university, this person stuck to me like a piece of chewing gum. Leaving aside the messages on various social platforms, he has visited Peking University several times. Every time he would pretend to wait downstairs of the girls' dormitory for a few hours. If I didn't see him, he would ask someone to bring me all kinds of things, successfully creating the image of me as a heartless person in the eyes of some classmates. I haven't told Frank about all these things. I don't know why. Subconsciously, I seem not to want Frank to know that there is still some connection between Leo and me. Leo said he had reserved a restaurant, thinking that it really didn't look good to pull and tug outside, and that we really needed a quiet environment to talk. I agreed. He took me to a Cantonese restaurant, looking at the familiar dishes. I remembered that in my previous life, the last meal between us was also Cantonese cuisine. During the meal, we talked about the relevant content of the divorce agreement. At that time, Leo no longer concealed anything. He used all kinds of threats and insults to make me hand over the so-called evidence. His handle. In the end, of course, we broke up. Leo turned over the table, and the boiling pork bone soup splashed onto my legs, which were wearing single pants. After that, when I went home alone, I encountered that car accident. At this moment, Leo opposite me smiled gently at me. Exactly the same as before. But I thought of that sentence from Empresses in the Palace: the gentle knife cuts people's lives with every stroke. Leo, I hope that after today, we will be strangers. The smile on Leo's lips froze. Mina, maybe in your opinion, my attitude towards you has changed very quickly and strangely. And you can't understand it. I don't want to give any reasons. Or there are simply no reasons. I don't like you. And I won't like you now or in the future. I hope we can disappear from each other's worlds. I hope you won't pester me anymore. You know, that's really beneath you. Leo's face turned ugly. Do you like Frank? It's none of your business who I like. We had a very silent meal. After it was over, Leo insisted on sending me to the door of the dormitory. I understand what you said today, he suddenly said, looking in an unknown direction. Let's have one last hug. Then he suddenly hugged me. I was probably stunned for 3 seconds. Then I bent my knees and lifted them up. The next second, I heard Leo let out a howl. After the matter with Leo was settled, I noticed a subtle change in Frank's attitude towards me. He seemed to start avoiding me. I was left alone in the law elective course. And it was only then that I realized that Frank actually didn't need to take this class. On weekends when we used to make appointments to have meals or go hiking together, he declined with the excuse of having to participate in various club activities, competitions, and other matters of different sizes. By the time I realized it, I hadn't seen Frank for almost a whole month. Once, I met Frank's roommate who had teased about the candlelit dinner in the cafeteria. His gaze towards me was also different from before. Holding his tray, he seemed to hesitate for a moment. And then he sat down opposite me. Mina. He leaned his head towards the middle of the table. Did you break up with our Frank? I mechanically tugged at the corners of my mouth. What makes you say that? Something must have happened on the night you two had that candlelit dinner. Right? When Frank came back to the dormitory, his face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and I didn't even dare to breathe. Candlelit dinner. Do you want to have a candlelit dinner? Suddenly, the look in Frank's eyes when he asked me this question flashed through my mind. And, later, when I refused to a dinner with him and dragged Leo away, Frank's figure that seemed somewhat lonely. After that, the direction he was looking at, before Leo suddenly hugged me downstairs in the dormitory. It seemed that something was about to burst out. I took out my phone and called Frank. But there was only a busy tone for a long time. And no one answered. Frank has gone to a competition. He should be in intensive training in the neighboring city now. Frank's roommate raised his eyebrows at me. Have a good talk with him when he gets back. What's the point of having a feud? You two hurting each other is hurting us. I waited for more than half a month. The day before Frank returned to school. The study tour project my tutor was in charge of started ahead of schedule. With the messy matters that I hadn't sorted out yet, I boarded a plane to Nepal. The place we went to was a quiet and beautiful village, which was rather remote. The moment I checked into the guest house, I suddenly felt a bit restless. I knew very well that the source of this restlessness was a subtle overlap. In my previous life, at this exact time, I went on a study tour abroad and encountered an earthquake. The magnitude of the earthquake wasn't too strong, and it didn't cause significant casualties or losses. But it really gave people a good scare. During the chaotic evacuation, it was Leo who accompanied me on the phone for the whole night. He soothed my turbulent heart, gently and considerately. When it was dawn, Leo said to me, "Nina, let's get married as soon as we graduate from university." At the moment he said this, the first ray of sunlight in the morning shone on me through the clouds. "Are you proposing to me?" "Yes, having fulfilled my session." Leo's tone was firm. "Marry me, Nina." Now, when I think back on this matter and that moment that touched me so deeply, he might be holding another girl's beautiful body in his arms. How disgusting. On the evening of the third day of the study tour, the earthquake really came. In this country where earthquakes occur frequently, the locals have become accustomed to some earthquakes of not very high magnitudes. After everything gradually subsided, the news came that this earthquake had damaged the relevant facilities of the nearby base stations, causing a communication breakdown, and the time for restoration was to be determined. Since we were already here, we might as well make the best of it. Since the study tour project couldn't be carried out, we simply got involved in some disaster relief activities within our capabilities. I don't know how much time had passed. When I was leading the children in the village to play, I suddenly heard someone call my name in Chinese from behind me. The voice was both familiar and strange. Before I could turn around and see clearly, I was pushed back to steps by a very strong hug. It was Frank. "I finally found you." The deep and hoarse male voice was right beside my ear. From the domestic to Nepal, and then to this remote place. I couldn't imagine how long he had searched to find this place. In his warm and real embrace, I suddenly remembered in that earthquake that year. On the second day after I was transferred to a safe area, I met Frank, who looked haggard. He said that he happened to come to Nepal for a trip and encountered the earthquake. I didn't expect to meet me here. What I ignored at that time was that he only had a carry-on backpack with him. And there was none of the luggage that one should have for a so-called trip. Could it be that the scene at that time was actually the same as the present moment? Could it be that the person in front of me, during the time I didn't know, has it always been like this? Half a month later, we returned to China. Immediately after the exam week and various assessments of different sizes came. I could keep my cool, but I found that Frank could keep his even better than me. I glanced at Frank, who was concentrating on writing and drawing on the paper opposite me, and gave a resentful cold snort before looking out the window. There was a very large lawn outside the library, and if you sniffed carefully, you could smell the unique fragrance of the grass in the air. This scene suddenly resembled the countless scenes during the sprint for the college entrance examination in senior year of high school, when I forced Frank to tutor me in the library. My phone suddenly rang twice, and several messages came from a number I hadn't seen for a long time. "Nina, I miss you so much. I can't bear to disappear from your world. Nina, no matter what I did wrong, my feelings for you have never changed. Nina, give me a chance." According to Crystal, who was also studying at University R, Leo was in a relationship with the class beauty from the neighboring class. The two of them had liked each other since high school, and now they had finally confessed their feelings to each other and even held a grand confession ceremony. But they seemed to be quarreling recently. I opened WeChat, found the class beauty in the grade group chat, Added her. Sent the chat screenshots. And then deleted her as a friend. This is the price Leo has to pay for annoying me. Frank. I threw my phone aside, leaned towards the middle of the table, and crooked my finger at him. It's my birthday tomorrow. Let's go out for dinner. Your birthday? A trace of confusion flashed in Frank's eyes. I remember it doesn't seem to be. I said it is. So it is. All right. He chuckled. What do you want to eat? Eat? A candlelit dinner? With my deliberate raised eyebrows. I seemed to see a blush creep up his ears. In the end, the candlelit dinner didn't happen. Even though I was given a second chance at life. A nightmare that had haunted my dreams for countless nights still didn't let me go. When the speeding vehicle was about to hit me, I felt another powerful force push me away. I didn't even dare to turn around to see where that force came from. The breaking of bones. The splashing of blood. The crowd of onlookers. The center of the accident became another person. I cried heartbrokenly. And it felt as if a sharp knife had pierced through my chest. If the price of being reborn was to exchange Frank's life for my survival, I would rather have died in that pitch-black rainy night in my previous life. You're finally awake. A familiar voice came from beside my ear. With a thick sobbing tone. Mina. Do you know how long you've been in a coma? I thought you. I tried hard to prop up my heavy eyelids to identify whose voice was surrounding me at the moment. Until I saw Crystal's face. Long curly hair of tan color. Makeup smudged from crying. The ear piercings we got together during our university days. It was Crystal from 10 years later. I'm back? I tried hard to make myself believe that I had a long and real dream. During the month in the ICU, everyone thought that I couldn't survive. And even if I did, I would be in a coma for a long time. But I woke up all of a sudden. The attending doctor said it was a miracle. Crystal said it was because I was destined not to die. Yes, having fulfilled where I was destined not to die. At the end of that long dream, I stood on the brink of life and death, and someone saved me and brought me back to reality. Well, it's time to settle the scores properly. Not only do I want to divorce Leo, but I also want him to be punished by the law. It was a warm winter afternoon. The sunlight shone through the window of the ward, and you could clearly see the dust floating in the air. I tried hard to lean against the pillow behind me, trying to sit up straight. Crystal had just sent me a message saying that she had picked up the person and they were almost in the elevator. A few minutes later, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, the door of the ward was opened. Crystal came in first. And there was a look of both emotion and surprise on her face. Mina. Look who's here. Crystal moved aside half a step, and a young man in a black suit walked closer, stepping on the sunlight on the floor. I was stunned. The man stopped a few steps away from my bedside, tilted his head slightly, and there seemed to be little glimmers of light in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curved into a faint arc, and he showed an extremely gentle smile. Hello. I'm your attorney Frank. The end.